All right. So, hi, everyone. My name is Pedro Cruz, and I'm a developer advocate at IBM. We're really excited to have you here today as part of the IBM Call for Code Education Innovation Case Competition, presented in partnership with CGI University. So, through the case competition, and let me sure I get all these details right. Through the case competition, CGIU and Call for Code's focus is to connect students across diverse academic disciplines from around the world to design and present innovative technological solutions to advance UN Sustainable Development Goal 4, which is focused on ensuring inclusive and equitable education and promoting lifelong learning opportunities for all. So it has been an exciting first half of the case competition, and we are really enjoying connecting with you all through these sessions. As a reminder, next week we have a session led by CGIU's Senior Impact and Design Manager, Miyashia Alexander, who will lead participants through an interactive session and effective storytelling. Additionally, the deadline to submit a solution or project is Thursday, November 11th. So participants in Call for Code's Education Innovation Case Competition are also encouraged to apply to CGIU 2022 with their Education Innovation Competition project. The application is officially open, and prospective students who want to apply can check it out at cgiu.org/apply. And all this information, if you're participating in the webinar, will be sent to you and also look through in the chat. We encourage you to check out our tips and tricks for aligning your case competition project with the CGIU 2022 application. They can be found in the submission tips document on the competition webpage. So today, I'm really thrilled to join by two CGIU alumni who have extensive experience working at the intersection of technology, innovation, and social justice, and who will be sharing ways that students from both technical and non-technical backgrounds uh, can leverage technology to support access to quality education and help build a more equitable future. I will also be sharing examples of applications that use AI, IoT, and cloud computing. It is my pleasure to introduce Junette Maxis, co-founder and CEO of L'Ecole, and Oscar Romero, Director of Inclusive Innovation and International Cooperation at the NYC Mayor's Office of the Chief Technology Officer. Welcome. Hey, Oscar. Hi, Junette. How's it going?
Thank you. Thank you, Pedro. Very happy to be here.
Thank you, likewise. Super excited about this conversation.
Likewise. So I'm really excited because you both have real world experience when it comes to using emerging technologies to help people. So I want to kick us off in our discussion with a question for Junette. You co-founded L'Ecole, an educational platform based in Haiti that helps students increase academic performance. What inspired you to found your venture, and how are you leveraging technology to advance educational access?
So, let me start by saying about a decade ago, when my current co-founders and we started our CGIU project, which was Sauver la Vie, we wanted to make critical life-saving information available to people in Haiti to whom it wasn't readily accessible. And what we found out through that process was students were the ones who were actually gravitating towards what we were creating. We published our first booklet, which was Practical Guides for Survival. It was published in Creole, and it was providing information about what to do when you're faced with a disaster and you're faced with some electrical accidents, whether it's outside your home or inside your home. And we realized students were gravitating towards it because it was a different way for them to learn. So they were using that material as a supplement to their studies. And they were taking it and taking it to their churches, taking it to their families, and passing it around. And those students were not necessarily top in their classes. In fact, a lot of them were just below average students. So we realized that there was a fundamental issue. There was a fundamental problem in the way students were learning. Students who could otherwise thrive, but they didn't have the right environment and the right tools. So we created l'école because we wanted to bring those students in and help them give the best they could in their academic performance.
Really amazing. So what has been like the best success story in your company?
One of the students that one of the students who used our platform, it was back in 2018, soon after we had launched the pilot. The students got back to us saying, hey, we have used this platform after I failed the national exam, and now I have passed. So to me, that was one of the greatest things, just to know that what we set out to do, which is helping students perform well, helping them staying in school and completing their high school diploma, that we were reaching that goal. So I think using technology to help solve some of the inherent issues that you find, especially in under-resourced countries, it can be a great way to help us advance to those global goals that we have for the world.
Oh, that's really amazing to hear. So, Oscar, you want to say something?
Well, this is just exciting. I mean, honestly, I think what could only wish for is that what you said to do is something you can achieve. So, and to be completely honest with you, I think access to education is kind of a foundational problem that if you do not solve, then everything else is kind of very complicated to address. So yeah, I'm just very excited to hear about the success of LECO.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Oscar. So you are the Director of Inclusive Innovation and International Cooperation at the New York City's Mayor's Office of the Chief Technology Officer. Can you tell us a bit more about the work that you are doing and what does inclusive innovation mean to you?
Of course. So the work that we do is really around civic engagement. So what engaging with the government should be something that everybody have access to. But unfortunately, it is a privilege to engage with government. People in the context of vulnerability have a lot of things to do. They have multiple jobs. They do not have time to simply go out and engage with what we do. I think another challenge that governments have is to de-romanticize what civic engagement means. The reality is that somebody doesn't just wake up one day and say, hey, I want to understand how the transportation system rules are going to change today. They engage with government when something is so fundamentally broken that they cannot continue to do what they do in their daily basis. So what we're trying to do here is to change how government does civic engagement, to rather than waiting until something is so broken, to go and meet people where they are and engaging them in how we design the agendas for the civic tech work that the city does. So the idea is that we go to neighborhoods that have faced different forms of systemic inequality, whether that might have been geographic inequality, access to infrastructure, access to services, and then we create spaces for communities to come together and challenge and share with us what are the challenges they face. And at that point, if people say that they're concerned, for instance, about safety, then we have to find out what kind of safety, what time, in what street, and what type of problem. And then once we do that, if there is a place where technology and innovation can help addressing that problem, then rather than trying to find solutions on our own, we start talking to other governments and create cooperation mechanisms for other cities to work together with us in addressing these problems. So now, when it comes to what innovation, inclusive innovation means to us, we think of innovation as both a process and a system. A process because it has a beginning and an end. It has an idea stage where you apply to CIU, you know what you want to do, you have, and then you have reason to believe that your idea is going to be successful. Then it gets to the adoption phase when people actually give you funding. You go out there and make it happen. However way you do it, you just make it happen. But then once you stop being behind your idea, once you stop telling people, hey, you should definitely do this, this is going to be amazing for you, does that idea stick? And that is the last phase, that is the retention phase. If it does, then congratulations, you become part of the status quo, and then the innovation process starts all over again. Now, this doesn't happen in a vacuum. There is a system of inequality that people face, and there are institutions that set the rules. Sometimes they rather do it slowly, and then a bunch of things that shouldn't have happened happen in the tech world. And then there's also cultural practices that just change the likeliness for something to be successful in a particular context or make it harder for certain things. Now, we don't believe that going through this process should be something that government should do just for the sake of profit or efficiencies. We believe that the role of innovation should be to address poverty and inequality. And when we work and go through this entire process and change the institutions and change the rules and try to create it more more accessible for people to leverage all these new technologies, it is because we want to fundamentally address poverty and inequality in communities. And that, to us, is what inclusive innovation means.
Amazing work, Oscar. I think it's very important that you provide those bridges to the community. I'm very passionate about civic tech in Puerto Rico, and I would love a framework to learn from how other governments and other communities around the world are, providing that bridge to understand the problems of the community, find the developers to be able to create open source solutions, and make sure that the government can also give it life and make sure that it has enough funding to continue and be sustainable. So congrats with that.
Thank you, Pedro.
Awesome. So next up, Jeanette. So your organization, L'École, is committed to integrating digital tools into the student experience. Since founding L'École, what lessons have you learned about the role of technology in expanding education access?
Yeah, I have to say, when we first started working on L'École, a lot of people, and us as well, we were not 100% sure that we were going to reach the people we wanted to work with, the people we wanted to reach. And the reason being, of course, we know there's a difference in access for people that have and people that don't have. And one thing we have found out is people are actually more willing to adopt. They're more willing to learn something new when it is really solving the problems that they are faced with every day. And so one of the best things we have learned is incorporating and making people join the process, the kind of talking with them and really solving for what they are faced with, rather than bringing a solution to them and thinking that's going to address the problems that you probably identified or you see as the main issue. So that has taught us a lot. And we think every day as we continue to develop the L'École platform, we realize how important it is to make sure everything we bring in, it comes from the people we're working with instead of coming from our team.
Great. And so I have a question regarding that lesson. How can others around the world take that and apply it to their organization?
That's a very good question. I think a lot of times when people are creating different solutions, people probably don't spend enough time getting to know the cultures. They don't spend enough time getting to know the beliefs. They don't spend enough time just eating, with the people that they're working with. And I think everybody who is creating technological solutions and whatever the problem is that I think they are trying to solve, I think people need to realize that before you even start working on what you're creating, you need to start with that phase. Just spending time with the people, really getting to know them. So I think, to me, that's one of the most important things that people should take as they are creating solutions.
Great. I know I'm going to take that home. All right. So, Oscar, let me see here, make sure I have it. Okay, so at the New York City's mayor's office, you work to address a broad range of urban development challenges, from workforce development to infrastructure, to expanding accessible mental health resources. How do you choose the type of projects that you focus on at a given time? How do you determine which technologies will be most effective in tackling each issue?
Well, so to the first question, I actually don't. I actually don't choose the problems. Well, the communities do, and I think that is very important. We go to, for every neighborhood where we work at, we create these spaces where community advocates that work on all sorts of issues, housing, arts and culture, education, whatever it might be, can come together and then tell us what are the priority issues that they want us to work on. Then based on what they say, we do research, and then we try to find whether there are applications of technologies that could make sense to address those problems. I'll give you examples. If we're thinking about information and communication technologies, then there's only a few things that can address. Is there a communication problem? Meaning people do not know their rights, or do not know how to go over a particular process with the city, or do not know what to do in a particular situation. If it is a communication problem, then technology can help. Is it a calculation problem? Is there something that is so complex that we can no longer continue to do in an Excel sheet? It might be that it has to do with mapping out where are the places in the city that are more likely to displace people based on the change of the real estate market. It might be sensing climate change and the possibility for anything. That could be all the way from earthquakes to fires or to floods. So the other problems that we identified that can actually address are simplification. Governments love their forms. They love to make things complicated. So in any way that you can transform that into simple questions and make it more accessible to people, it makes a lot of a difference. And then finally, it is a matter of automation. Are there things that we could have technology do and save people time and then use their time to actually address somebody's problems? So if what we find in a community has to do anything with this, then that's when we think ICTs can play a role. Now, to give you an example on mental health, one of the challenges we faced is that there were very little culturally competent materials that could be meaningful to the reality of immigrant families. And if you, the people that were, for instance, capable to have access to healthcare, which is a big deal, and then also capable to actually go to a session with a therapist, they often find that the therapist just didn't have the cultural experience to actually be able to understand their problems. If your therapist comes from somewhere in, say, the East Village or New York City, and your therapist comes from a relatively wealthy family because that's how expensive medical education is in this country, then chances are that person is not going to understand the realities of immigrant communities. So this was a problem of content. So this was a problem that technology could actually address if we had the right content. And then the last thought I would like to say is, we also try to think about things outside the box of information and communication technologies. There's so much more that can be done with new science that people could explore. For instance, when we were trying to address the challenges of the heat island effect, when basically the sun during the day generates so much heat that the asphalt absorbs, and then during the night it releases it and maintains a certain high temperature during the summer days, that makes it very challenging for certain groups of people. We start to look into what are the design of the asphalt, and could that be improved so that then it would not absorb as much heat. So there's a lot of science that can be implemented. It doesn't have to be ACTs. And I think that's what technology we choose, whatever actually can address the problem.
All right, so now we're going to move on to the following topic, designing and implementing the technologies of tomorrow. I have a question now for both of you. We have seen that technology has the potential to both solve and perpetuate existing digital divides. In fact, now more than ever, we are reliant on digital technologies. to keep us connected around the world. In what ways has tech leveled the playing field and accelerated growth, particularly for those in underdeveloped and under-resourced settings? What barriers still exist? Jeanette.
All right. I'll go ahead and get started with that. Yes, and technology has been just a revolutionary tool for everyone in the world. And I think we have seen, as you said, it has connected us a whole lot more. And the fact that we have the sum total of the world information available in our pocket, and anyone can just get access to that and really learn and just help solve the different issues we have. But I think, unfortunately, we don't have enough people focusing on the underdeveloped world, because and I think that's one of the things I like about CGIU, and the fact that it just brings all the right people together, and it brings in students, and basically you don't have to be extraordinary, just brings ordinary people together to kind of put their thoughts together and try to address issues that can help solve different problems in the underdeveloped world. And I think we need more of that. And we need more people really designing and just focusing on those infrastructure issues that we find in the developed world. Because personally, that's one thing we see in Haiti. While it is great, what we are doing is providing access to a lot of people who otherwise wouldn't have it, and students who don't have to worry if they have some disruptions, if they have any issues just getting access to learning on a regular basis. They can access our platform. But I have to say, one of the things that we did that made it even more accessible was bringing the community and basically letting people know that education is not a family issue, is not an individual student problem, it's a societal problem. It's, in fact, I personally think it should be a global issue, because like we said, we are all connected. And when you find people who are poorly educated or who are not educated at all, we all pay the consequences. And so technology has the power to help us move forward, but we certainly need more people to come together and seeing the developing world in that process.
Couldn't agree more, Jeanette. Oscar, any thoughts here?
Absolutely. I think the first thing I would like to say is that I often find that it is not a lack of innovation, it is a lack of certain types of resources. But in in the developing world, and really across any particular place where you have a community that is being challenged by greater barriers to live the type of quality of life they want to live, because that is what inequality is, then they actually are very resourceful. You want to know about innovation, go and stretch $3 for a family for to actually make a meal and make it happen. People in the conditions of challenging situations innovate every day, all the time. So I think there's a paradigm that needs to change. I don't think it is about bringing innovation to certain places. No, it's about listening. It's about listening and bringing resources so that people can actually empower themselves and do what they need to do. And I think that without a question, the deployment of telecommunications infrastructure has generated a lot of inequalities. There's new infrastructure that goes to certain places and it doesn't go to other places. The digital divide is broad. It's not only access to devices, it's having the infrastructure, being able to actually pay the bills and knowing how to use all those things. And once you do all of that, then you're a social media user. How do you move from there to actually being able to leverage that to improve your quality of life? It's challenging. It is. That being said, we have a bunch of things that we didn't have before that we can use to address all sorts of problems. If you go to places like Cuba, for instance, where there's very limited access to infrastructure, you will see amazing entire offline undertakings where people are sharing critical information, they're sharing information on medical resources, and they find ways to do that. If you go to favelas in Brazil, Complejo de Alemão, for instance, in Rio, you will see amazing tech training programs where youth are developing skills that they can use to actually improve their quality of life dramatically. And it doesn't mean that everybody's going to become a developer, but it does mean that then you have more choice, because then you can be a freelancer, you can make money, and then you can go and pursue whatever else you want to pursue in life. And I think that, education, acknowledging, recognizing, and providing and just recognizing the space at the center of the design of public policies that people should play, and then leveraging institutions. I think there's a lot of power in leveraging institutions. It might be hard to connect every single individual, but it is not as hard to connect universities. It is not as hard to connect governments or hospitals. And what you can do when you do that is just tremendous everywhere.
Wow, amazing. And I can't wait to hear what we're going to do in the future. Once we provide this foundation of education, once we provide more access, more equitable access to this information technology, I feel we're going to see a huge leap forward in what we can do in our society. I think it's going to be a lot more equitable. So next question. Different communities have different needs. When developing and introducing new technologies, how can we integrate users into the creative process and help them feel ownership over the technology? What are some of the key considerations that students should have with respect to the communities they operate in?
That's a very important question, and I think we have touched a little bit on this, the need to make the people we're working with make them become part of the creative process. And I think Oscar has mentioned it earlier when he said he does not pick the problem, the community identifies the problem. And I think that is very key. And so for any student who is developing solutions and just creating whatever project they are creating, and I think they certainly need to take that as a key point. Not letting them be the people that identify what the problem is and solving it. And I think really, having a conversation, because for us at L'École, when we had the idea, we saw the problem, we wanted to partner with the teachers. We wanted to bring them in to get to know how they behave, how do the classrooms work, even getting to know their daily lives. And so, for example, one of the things you find, which is in Haiti, you find a lot of teachers who teach at multiple schools. And one of the reasons is because they may be able to get a certain hours of work at a particular school, but that's not enough to meet their basic needs. And so within one day, they may have to circulate between multiple schools to teach multiple classes. And so we had to take that into consideration as we created our platform, because we don't want to have teachers having one account for this school and one account for that school. We didn't want to complicate it, because their lifestyle and the way they work is very different. And it's the same way, you'll find in some schools may have just about 30 students in a classroom, 40 students, but you have schools that have over 100 students, and so those are elements that are very important. And so when you want to serve a category of people, getting to know what their situations are, even to the slightest little details, because that could make the difference, whether or not they actually use your product. So that's one of the most important points. Getting to know every detail about what the situation is, how does it differ, because you'll find some groups of people that have, even within the country, within a specific area, they can be very different in the way that they work. So it's very important to know what are the details and what can make a very big difference to the user, because otherwise you may think you're creating something for them, but they don't want to use it just because you missed a very small detail.
Definitely. Well said, Joanne. And I hope everyone listening at home is taking notes. This is very important tips and really the mindset that you have to get into when developing a solution. What I see, and I've participated in as a mentor in over 50 hackathons all around the world, I see a lot that people assume what people want. They try to create a solution, they think of the idea, but they don't take the time to understand the problem. So as you create your solutions, finalize your presentations, and move forward, remember to ask questions, to talk directly to the people who you're creating the solution for, and understand the problem. Focus less on the solution that you have thought of, and focus and really understand the problem. All right, so I'm gonna give this question to Oscar. Oscar, many metrics exist for measuring progress, especially with the advent of new technologies. How do you personally measure project impact and individual success? What are those KPIs?
Yes, so this is really amazing. So we have some KPIs for a program around how well we do community engagement, how often people continue to engage with us. So for instance, one thing is to do an event and have people come to us and talk to you about challenges. But then are we really able to deliver on the things we said we were going to deliver? Will people continue to come to us? So there's a lot of indicators to understand how, as a machine, as government, we operate in the design of the services that we deliver. But then to me, the most meaningful indicators are in the actual projects that we launch to address the problems themselves. So every problem, every project is going to have different indicators. And if I could offer one advice to students, I will say, think about the outcomes that you are expecting to achieve. Not only, so when I say that, I mean, there's the things that you do, the activities you say, well, I'm going to interview this many people. Then there's the things that emerge out of those activities, the outputs that you get, saying, okay, we published this report. We now have this user research base that tells us about a problem. And then there's the outcomes. There's like what change happened based on what you did, like where people served because of what you did. Was like in some cases, it is about you designing the solution that you're creating, right? Like it might be that the outcome of this whole engagement is that your solution now exists and it didn't before. But then hopefully that solution is there for something to actually generate some change in people. So rather than saying these are the golden indicators, I think what matters is that you have a thoughtful process of reflection. Just reflect and make sure you find what makes sense and ask yourself this question all the time. Is what I'm doing leading to the change I want? If the answer is no, reflect again and work again.
Amazing. So Jeanette, any closing thoughts
Yes.
for those students? So I'm sorry. What is your advice to other young people who are interested in entering the social impact space? Where should they begin?
Yes. So I think for every student who wants to get into the social impact space, I would definitely highlight the point to get to know the people you want to work with. And just another point I think is very important is staying true to your values and your missions, because it is very hard sometimes when you are moving along your project and you're trying to make it sustainable and you want to grow, and at the same time you want to make sure you are staying true to your mission and values. And so for us, a lot of people have asked us so many things they wanted in our application. You find schools who are saying, can we have video conferencing? Can we do this? Can we do that? But we repeatedly tell ourselves, okay, what kind of access do the people we want to reach have? So how do we continuously make sure what we are creating is going to work for them? So it is very critical to keep that balance, making sure you're creating something that's sustainable, it's responding to what people want, but at the same time, staying true to your values.
Love it. Thank you so much, Jeanette. I personally have learned so much from you. Oscar, any final thoughts?
I just couldn't agree more with Jeanette. The values that you are set up to achieve, the goals that you have, should always be your North Star. I think that, like Yunette said, civic engagement, co-design, user research, however you want to call it, it is not, you shouldn't see that as a burden. That is an added value. And then find a way in which talking to people makes sense for the stage in which you are. It may be that it is just having a conversations where you're in the idea stage. Then go and have those conversations. It might be that it is about having surveys. It might be that then eventually you need people to actually play with the things. It might be that you need to use them, the service. It might be that you just need to sit and listen or observe. Whatever it is, make sure you find the way to do it and you do it. And fundraise for it. Make it count. Like anybody that works in this space, and big tech companies know this very well. If you do not iterate your products, if you do not do user research, it's not going to be successful. So they know when you ask that this is not something that it's a nice to have. And then finally, I will say, just really believe in the mission that you bring to the table. You're probably working on this and you're here because there's something that is close to your heart. Make sure you convey that message whenever in wherever phase you are of your process.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Oscar. And once again, thank you so much, Jeanette, for participating in this discussion. I'm really proud that both of you are creating this impact in our society. We really need more people like you. And I hope people watching really got a few tips today, something that they can learn from and pass on to others. So once again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Pedro. Thank you,
Thank
Oscar.
Thank you, Jeanette.
Awesome.
Pedro. Ciao.
Awesome. Goodbye. All right, so don't go yet. Now I'm going to give my experience in Tech for Good applications. I'm going to talk about how you can learn about technology and apply it to your projects, all right? I'm going to give a few resources on where you can learn how to get started, no matter if you don't have any programming experience. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to the presentation. And if there's anything wrong with the screen share, please let me know. All right, so my name is Pedro, and I have been hacking hurricanes, earthquakes, and COVID-19 now for a few years. My passion is in civic tech applications. So let's step back. I am from Puerto Rico. This was some drone footage that I was taking back in March, I think around 15th. So this is in Manatí. I was just having a lot of fun, and I received a message. I saw on the radio and social media on that day that the pandemic officially was affected in Puerto Rico. We got our first cases, and there was going to be a lockdown. So that was where I was when the lockdown was announced. In the past, Puerto Rico has suffered from hurricanes, landslides. We were about a year without electricity and continue to have problems. So Puerto Rico, I love it, and it's my home. But we need so much help to be able to live in this environment. And I know many places around the world are as well affected by these natural events. So my story in civic tech and tech for good started after Hurricane Maria. A few weeks after the hurricane, there was rumors and people were seeing helicopters around the island. We didn't have ways to communicate. There were no cell towers. They were all down. They didn't have power, and many were destroyed. But the government was going around doing checking on people. And people saw the helicopters, and they saw on the ground, many communities started writing SOS messages. And there were communities that were completely cut off, people who lived in the mountains that could not really talk to anyone and receive aid. So people in the community came together to write these messages on the ground, on the roofs of houses. On the top left, there's an image where it says, "Estamos vivos," we're alive. So people just wanted to signal to people that they were alive and this community was fine. So during that moment, that really stuck with me. That people were using these messages like SOS to communicate when there isn't power. This is where I was in October 2017, and there was only a few lamps to work with. There was the only place I had to have Wi-Fi, but I was passionate there to create applications that could help people in this moment. I didn't even have electricity and barely had water, but it didn't really matter to me because I really wanted to help, and I know there was a huge community of people who felt the same way. So many people came together that there was a Maria Tech Brigade. People in the diaspora outside of the island in Puerto Rico started creating solutions to help with communication. And that's where really my story got started. A year later, after Maria, IBM visited the island to do a hackathon. This is the first year of Call for Code, and that's where I originally got started. And I created an application that is an aerial scout for first responders. Imagine drones after a natural disaster, even though there isn't any electricity, they can automatically scan the environment, determine where are the places that need the most help. And using AI, machine learning techniques, you could really prioritize where people need the aid. So at the hackathon in Puerto Rico, you can see on the right there in the cloud, I was able to print out a simple banner that said that had some icons, and those icons represented what people needed. So water, food, and medical aid. And imagine people like on the left, remember the image I was showing earlier that people were putting SOS, agua y comida? We could standardize that. We could have people know if you write that and you have no way to communicate, there will be helicopters, drones, and people watching over you. That was the whole idea of Drone Aid, and to this day, it's open source. You can go on GitHub, see the code, and use it in your life. So that was an application of how we can use artificial intelligence technologies. Let's talk about Internet of Things, or IoT. So for those who've never heard of the term, it basically it connects little small devices all around into a network to the internet. So think of, for example, your a dog. Imagine you want to track your dog so that they don't get lost. The dog collar could have an IoT device to communicate with an application. You can have sensors on your house to detect the weather and record when there's going to be a potential hurricane. There's so many applications for IoT, and in the first year in Call for Code, Project OWL, they were the winners of the grand challenge, and they created a system to make an off-the-grid communications network. So in Puerto Rico, we didn't have cellular network, but imagine that people could deploy this really cheap device, this very low-cost device, and make a backup network to be able to just tell your family that you're fine, or if you have an emergency, you could communicate directly to 911. So the cool thing is that Project OWL, they never had met each other. This was before the pandemic, and they all worked remotely and only met at the final award ceremony of the competition. Afterwards, they came down to Puerto Rico on the island and connected with students to be able to deploy and test their network. So this is just one example of how you can use IoT in your community in these natural disaster scenarios. One project that I'm currently working on is Grillo, or OpenEEW. So this one is very dear to my heart because after we got struck by a hurricane, last year we got struck by a 6.4 earthquake. And there is approximately 1 billion people around the world today that are affected by earthquakes. So this is a huge problem. We need better technology. We need to activate people to create early warning systems. And that's what Grillo does. Grillo is an IoT device that helps alert people when there is an earthquake. We can use thousands and hundreds of thousands of these devices to provide better data and maybe one day even forecast earthquakes. In addition to that, and to IoT, you can also combine rapid evaluation techniques. So imagine after an earthquake in your house, there's a crack on the wall and you're not sure if it's dangerous or not. You could use artificial intelligence to be able to evaluate those damages. And that's the project Damage Check. It's on GitHub as well. Feel free to look into the code if you're interested. But the combination of AI, IoT, and cloud computing really is going to move this industry forward to be able to provide faster solutions to people who need it. So one really important thing, we don't need more data. We need trustworthy insights. So after the pandemic, I know there was hundreds of people and maybe thousands providing access to dashboard and COVID-19 data. We need, at that moment, we needed more testing and contact tracing and other solutions. So remember, when you're providing access to data, whether you're creating dashboards or open data sets, data does not equal information. You really need to show the insights instead of just publishing the data without any thoughts there. So another program that I worked with as well is a contact tracing solution developed by MIT. And these solutions are very important to have before we have emergencies. So take consideration, even though right now we're not being heavily affected by emergencies 24/7. Around the world, there are people who work in this, but there are other people who they're fine, they're home watching Netflix. So if you can help and help prepare, create technologies that can help someone else in the world, I feel like that's how we're going to create a more equitable future where everyone has a level playing field to these life-saving technologies. So very important. I think it's important that you show up to these hackathons. To the students that are watching, you're doing the right step forward, right? You're doing the first step, which is participating in this event. It's really important that you show up and you collaborate with others. You understand what people really need in their community. Focus on what the tips of Oscar and Jeanette they said. And I really encourage you to not really to talk to the people you're providing the solution for, but also share it to others, and potentially even make it open source so that people can collaborate. So with that said, thank you. I'm going to now show a few resources on where you can learn about technology within the IBM platform. So if you are still getting started, you come from a non-technical background, we have different learning paths on the website. You can go to developer.ibm.com, and in there you can see that we have information about artificial intelligence, containerization, which is how do you scale your website into an environment where hundreds of thousands of people can use it. Programming language, if you're just getting started to learn, I recommend go with Python. Internet of Things, messaging, there's a lot of information here that may seem difficult, but there is something for you. There is something for everyone. So I would recommend go through stuff like the Watson chatbots. So here's a really cool tutorial. So you can update your chatbot on WhatsApp with IBM Watson. So imagine creating a chatbot that connects to WhatsApp through a service like Twilio. This is a quick tutorial on how you can make that happen. So when you create your solutions, I would recommend first, go look at what's available. There might be solutions that are similar to what you're thinking and that you can leverage when you're creating your presentation. And then next up, I also go to the Call for Code open source projects. So here you can see all the different projects that Call for Code has incubated. Across the years, we have impacted over 400,000 developers, data scientists, and problem solvers, and each have created a unique solution. So over 179 nations have participated in this event. And if you need some inspiration, I highly recommend that you go here to the open source projects, as well as our Call for Code for Racial Justice program, ongoing deployments, and really soon we're going to announce the Global Challenge Regional finalists and the winners of the competition. So stay tuned for that. All right, so it has been my pleasure to present to you, this information. I think Oscar and Jeanette's experience was very helpful to see how people who have participated in CGIU's events have gone off and impacted their communities positively. So I hope that you took a lot of notes and that if you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out. Remember the deadline for submission, and good luck to everyone. Bye.